And it's perhaps apt that I'm calling you from Rotterdam at the Cystic Fibrosis Research Conference, which is the first conference in person for 3 years. And it's just fantastic to see everybody back together again, as opposed to being on a Zoom meeting. And there's great progress, you know, and a lot of some of these things you might relate to as well. But just the drugs that are treating the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis, the amount of research aimed at improving services, patient groups and PPI is just such a huge topic here for the first time. The role of patient groups and registries, and you know, the sense of hope around cystic fibrosis.
We may have lost Philip there. He's a very bad connection. I'm going to give him a minute.
Really
You're back.
And we very much. Yeah. So there's so many challenges, you know, that many of you will face in terms of diagnosis, in terms of the under-resourcing of our hospitals, the cost of medications. You know, I'm very conscious to patient groups who are here in Rotterdam. They're not only have lost their input into medical research, but they're worried about survival and worried about ongoing treatment. So it kind of puts things in perspective. But tonight's Rare Disease Forum is led by the Health Research Charities Ireland. And I'm delighted to welcome its CEO, Dr. Avril Kennan, who you know very well and who's going to chair this evening's meeting. So over to you, Avril, and apologies for the quality of communication from Rotterdam.
Thanks so much, Philip. Don't worry, we heard almost all of that, which was a little better than we were expecting in the run up to it. So thank you so much for being with us. I know it wasn't easy to be here tonight, but we really appreciate it. So yeah, so my name is Avril Kennan. I'm the CEO of Health Research Charities Ireland. Thanks for being with us. We know it's never that easy to find the time on an evening, but it was the time we figured would be best to suit the most people. So I hope that it works for most of you. My organization represents and supports about 40 charities that have a strong focus on health research. So as you can imagine, many of them are patient organizations, and about a third of them are either rare disease patient organizations or else fund some rare disease research. So we ourselves are not usually public facing. Our duty as such is to our member organizations, but we recognize that rare diseases need our particular attention. And so we're delighted to be part of this rare disease forum with the other organizations that Philip mentioned. And as Philip said, we're leading out on this event today, and in line with our remit, the focus is on research. So we're aiming it at people who are themselves living with a rare disease in some way, patients, parents, carers. But we know that we also have a number of professionals with us working in rare diseases tonight. And thank you so much for being here. It really shows that you care, actually, and we're very glad to have you here with us as well. It's not easy living with a rare disease. That's maybe the first thing to say. And we know that many of you are here because you have had challenges along the way, whether that's long delays in diagnosis or a lack of medical expertise or a lack of treatments. But there's also a lot happening. And I just wanted to give you, before we go to the invited speakers, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of 5 important developments that we've seen very recently. And apologies to anybody who's joining us from the north. There's a slight southern perspective on my bit here, and I hope Amy Jane, who's joined us who to speak later, will be able to balance me out a little bit, because she'll be giving a perspective from the north. But the 5 things to particularly tell you about are, the first one is in relation to European reference networks, ERNs. So in January, Minister Stephen Donnelly got to announce that Ireland was to become an official member of 15 ERNs. And what these are is that they're 24 virtual centres that bring together rare disease healthcare practitioners and patients across Europe in these broad categories. So there's an ERN skin, an ERN eye, bone, endocrine, lung, and so on. And the intention is that every rare disease would have a home within one of these. So how that might look to you on the ground here is that your healthcare professional may be able to, in the future, have access to a wider range of expertise and knowledge than they would have just here in Ireland. So whether that's if they're dealing with a difficult diagnosis or a care pathway, that they will be linked in more broadly and able to avail of all that knowledge across Europe. But of course, they're also really important for research because they're facilitating the establishment of networks and supporting the sharing of health data, both things that are very, very important in rare disease research, where we know it's very scarce and very scattered. So working internationally is really, really important. So particular thanks to the National Clinical Programme for Rare Diseases for supporting Ireland's involvement in 16 different ERNs. The second thing to mention to you is something that we're very, very excited about. It's a new rare disease clinical trial network. So Minister Stephen Donnelly got to make a second announcement this year in February on Rare Disease Day to say that the Health Research Board, the HRB, would be funding a new rare disease clinical trial network. And I won't say any more about that because we have Rachel and Liam here to talk to us about that a little bit later. The third thing relates to a joint funding scheme that my organisation, HRCI, runs in partnership with the Health Research Board. So the joint funding scheme is a scheme that enables our member charities to secure matched funding for research projects that they want to fund. And we've just been through a round of that. The successful projects haven't yet been announced, but it's looking like a good percentage of them will focus on rare conditions. And over the years, it has been very favourable to rare disease projects, actually. Now, I say that knowing it is not an easy thing to fund rare disease research. So you have to be a registered charity. You have to have the money to do so. And you know, it particularly for under-resourced rare disease organisations, that is challenging. But we're always here to chat to any patient organisation who would like to get involved with us. And we also offer lots of support in research beyond the funding scheme. The fourth thing relates to a national genetics and genomics strategy. So the HSE have just announced just about 3 weeks ago that they are going to develop a national strategy in genetics and genomics. This is so needed. We know that genetic services are really, really struggling, that the waiting lists are far too long. And also it's really important that we support research in genetics and genomics so that we understand better the profile of rare diseases in Ireland and can start to look towards more tailored treatments for them. So we are involved a little bit in the development of that strategy. There's not a whole lot that we can tell you at the moment. It's very early days. We're hopeful, and we will, of course, be bringing a very strong patient perspective to those discussions. And the last thing to mention to you is that our colleagues in the HRB are currently very engaged in discussions in Europe about a proposed rare diseases partnership. So another European initiative, and it's aiming to facilitate collaboration across Europe in research and innovation to address the so-called unmet needs of the 30 or so million people who live with a rare disease in Europe. And the ambition of that partnership is to build on successes of earlier rare disease programs, European rare disease programs, and to look to solutions for tackling what we know the bottlenecks are. So we hope that Ireland will be a part of that. So just to say, before we move on, that I know that research is not always a priority. You know, the pressure of day-to-day issues can be so great. But at the same time, the improvements in care in the future are going to be almost totally dependent on the research of today. And that's why we give it such a big focus. And being involved in research you know, it can be all the way towards funding research projects, but it can also be as simple as asking your doctor or your other healthcare professionals what's happening in research, so that they know that there is an expectation on them that your care is evidence-based and that you are interested in knowing if you can participate in clinical trials and so on. And even just those conversations help to move things along. When we were preparing for today, I have a friend who has a child with a rare disease, and I thought I better mention this to her just in case she would like to come along. And she got back to me and she said, no, it's okay because my doctor's up to date with research and we're really happy with the care my daughter is receiving. And I was really taken by, you know, just struck by the fact that she is having a positive experience in Ireland, even though she lives with a rare disease. And I know that is not everybody's experience, but it could be and it should be. And I hope that research will get us to that point. So just to mention, we're very tight on time tonight. We don't want to keep you too late. We know that some of you have dinner waiting or that you have to get the kids to bed or whatever it is. We're not going to stop for questions after each of the speakers, but please use the chat function. And we will endeavour to get to as many of the questions or comments in there as we can. We can't answer clinical questions. We're not clinical. And even if we were, it wouldn't be the place to do that. But having said that, there's a lot of expertise on this call. So if any of you feel that you can address any of the questions that pop up, please do so. And maybe you might let us know who you are and where you're coming from tonight, just in the chat function, if you feel in the chat box there, if you feel comfortable to do that. So the first talk that we have lined up for this evening is transforming research in rare disease through partnership. And it's very intentional that we have this talk first on the agenda because I think often when you think about rare disease research, you know, you can go straight to new drugs or gene therapies, but actually the sort of social care side of research and quality of life research is really, really important to people who live with rare diseases as well. And it can help answer the questions that they have. It can make sure that their experiences are known and heard about and that we can address their issues better. So Dr. Suja Samanathan is an assistant professor in children's nursing in UCD, and she's joined by Julie Power, who is a patient contact and policy officer with Vasculitis Ireland and well known in patient circles. Thank you both for joining us, and you're going to talk about more social care research and your hopes for the future and how partnership plays a really important role in that. So I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Avril, for the wonderful introduction. And I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do, Suja. I'll tell you when it's up. Yeah, that looks great, Suja.
Okay. So, okay, that's great. So my time start now, right? So good evening, everyone. My name is Suja Somanathan. As Avril mentioned, I'm a children's nurse. I worked with the children and the family over 20 years. I worked in Temple Street for last 16 years before I moved to UCD. Currently, I'm a lecturer and a researcher at UCD. At the moment, while I'm speaking, I'm in the US, a city called Pittsburgh. I'm here to undertake my Fulbright Research Fellowship at the Center of Rare Disease Therapy at UPMC Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. I'm under the mentorship of Professor Jerry Walkley. He's a very well-known physician in metabolic disorders. Today, Julie and I are very pleased to have this opportunity to present our vision and mission for transforming rare disease research through partnership. So this slide really struck me because we all know there are known 7,000 or more rare diseases, but to me, it's full of names of the condition, but it's all about being as a one community, rare as one. As you know, there are single gene, there are multifactorial diseases, non-genomic, genomics. So I'm not going into detail. I just want to put it there. This is a one community, even though there are so many different conditions. Collectively, rare is common. So there are, at the moment in the island, we have 400,000 people living. In the US, because I'm in the US at the moment, there is around 30 million people in the US, and 1 in 10 have rare diseases, 1 in 17 in Ireland. And 80% of rare diseases have a genetic cause, and 75% have children. And there are life-limiting conditions, and 30% of children may die with before the 5th birthday. So there is a lot of challenge for the child and the family also across the life continuum. So again, this is something Avril just mentioned, and AG and myself did a lot of project around, and also across the world, there are a lot of researches also come up. Lack of awareness is something very common. Complex care needs is not about one condition or one management. There are so many conditions. Many people living with more than one rare disorders. Insufficient psychological and social support is not just about rare diseases across the healthcare system, we know. And early diagnosis is so keen and important, like a newborn screening program. More diagnostic intervention is important. And sadly, 90% of rare disease only have an approved, don't have an approved therapy. So there are a lot of work is needed in terms of clinical trial and the genetics and genomics aspect as well. So rare disease is something we started in my journey with the families living with rare diseases. We started this as very much as, engagement in the classroom, bringing the students, bringing the awareness of rare diseases. And you can see Anne Lawler is here talking to my students. That was in 2018. So then we talk about the partnership in research. We talk about this a lot, and not just me, many people, including Avril, there are so many people. We talk about this a lot. So often people use the partnership as the participation of partnership as a foggy concept. Again, that's a buzzword, a lot of people use it. But again, you need to have interpretation, what that mean to you and your family or anybody. So in 2018, in alignment with the National Rare Disease Plan in Ireland, we form a rare disease research network in Ireland, placing the families and patients at the heart of research. So we brought together, it's a collaborative effort. We brought together researchers, policymakers, clinicians. We come together as a group, offer a platform to promote a meaningful patient and public involvement in rare disease research. Again, when you look at this ladder, this is a ladder of participation. In that raindrop, which is Rare Disease Research Partnership, the patients and family are very much co-researchers. They design the project with us. It's very much co-designing, co-developing, co-creating the meaningful research for people living with the rare diseases. That was the whole motto behind the raindrop. So now we are building building the PPI into research leaders as well. So there are a lot of different ladders of participation. I know everybody here, everybody know what this PPI means. I don't need to say. PPI is not just about when you design a project, you bring the patients or a family. It's about working with them, moving or walking with them and making sure that they are informed, they are part of the plan, they are part of the dissemination and also translation. It's like a life cycle. It's like a journey together as a team. This is one of the events where, as part of the Rare Disease Raindrop project, you can see everybody participated, all the different disciplines. So these are the team, a lot of people involved. I'm just highlighting the PPI Expert Advisory Group for the Raindrop. Now I'm going to hand over to Julie to explain a bit more in detail about the partnership. Thank you, Julie.
Hello, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Julie Power. I'm Patient Contact and Policy Officer in Vasculitis Ireland Awareness. I've been living with a rare condition since 2005. And I think anybody that's living with a rare condition, you realise that suddenly partnerships become very, very important. So it's not just your own, within your own family or that. It's, like finding partnership within your own community. The support that you get from your own community is huge. And then you start realizing you need to have a partnership with your care team that are involved with you. And then to learn from other support groups that are out there, maybe not necessarily your own, but, like others, similar support groups that are out there. And eventually researchers and academics. So I'm going to share my screen now. So in a way, it's a little bit like the raindrop. So that, like we land in the center and then there's all these little ripples that come out beyond that. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to go full screen. There we are. Okay. So our project Raindrop started in 2018. That year, there was an awful lot of rare disease events happening for Rare Disease Day. And there was an awful lot of us all invested in it, like we were patient organizations, We were individual patients, families, we were umbrella groups, there were policymakers, researchers, and we were all working together to raise awareness of rare disease. And we all came from very different stakeholder backgrounds. And then we were very aware that the 2014-2018 Rare Disease Implementation Plan had in it, sorry, I'm trying to get my, there it is. I'm trying to get my slides to move on, had in it, you know, like a section to say that the needs and experiences of people with a rare disease, that they should be recognised, understood and addressed within all aspects of the Irish health system, including policy, services and research information. So our group worked very well together, and we decided that we'd maybe form a little group to start looking at the research priorities from a life course perspective rather than the traditional disease-specific needs. And we managed to secure a small grant from the HRB to get started on this project. So whenever we say that we were looking at the life course, what we were looking at was, you know, like the process to diagnosis and accessing treatment and how we manage these conditions and looking at the psycho and social aspects that affect us, and also to look at end of life care. So we had a few meetings in University College Dublin, and we decided that we would have a public consultation, and that public consultation consisted of 3 questions within each of those areas that I outlined in the previous slide. That you would ask 3 questions in each area. Now, it wasn't compulsory that you did. It was only that you would answer you would create questions in the areas that you would be interested in. But we also left an option for people to add their own question. And this public consultation was launched on Rare Disease Day 2019, and it lasted for 4 weeks. And I think the main way that we issued it was via public media. So what we got back an awful lot of information, and it took a lot of work to get through all, you know, like try and identify what were the main areas. So we found 3 main themes. So the first theme that we saw was a route to diagnosis. So this focused mainly on research questions, you know, like about obtaining a timely diagnosis, methods of it, how it was delivered, basis for bespoke treatment options. And aside from the basic genetic research challenges, we wanted to focus on how to communicate the diagnosis and treatment options to patients and their families. So the second theme for our workshop was living with and caring for rare diseases. So this would be the experience and the quality of life, the psychosocial needs. And this session would examine the patient experience of living with a rare disease journey rather than the disease-specific experience. And the third theme was integrated and palliative care, providing integrated care pathways. And this would be to identify integrated care challenges about rare diseases and areas for research. So we had invited a lot of people to these workshops, and we divided them into 3 groups, and each group had their own board within the workshop. So the first board was for people living with rare disease, and that included the family members, the carers, patient advocates and the advocacy groups. The second board was geared towards healthcare practitioners and included the clinical policymakers. And the third board, the third board was the academics, including the researchers, academic policymakers and the research managers. So these 3 boards were up at the workshop. And then the attendees were allocated some resources. So each one was given a copy of each of the statements within the 3 themes. And they were given a card of stickers in 3 colours, each denoting either high, medium or low priority. And the third thing they were given was a wallet of notes with €150, €220, €110 and €15. So after the discussion, each participant was asked to rank the statements in order of priority using their stickers and in order of feasibility using their notes. So at the end of that, we came up with 15 priorities. Now, I will show you the priorities here, but I'm not going to read them all through to you. But the first one was support at the time of diagnosis was the top priority for all the stakeholders in the room. When I say all the stakeholders, it's not just patients, it's the policymakers, it's the clinicians, it's the researchers, there were social workers, there was a load of representation. So that was the #1 priority that was identified in the workshop. The second priority was access to diagnostic tests for rare diseases. And the third one was, like education and training, and that wasn't just of the healthcare professionals, it was also within the patient organisations themselves, so the patients would have much more information and understanding of their illness and management of it, but also education in how to become involved in the research process. Also included in that would be education within the schools, like for children that were attending schools. And the fourth priority was, like including the patient voice, and that to also include that of children. As you will see, like data sharing, the psychosocial impact of living with the disease, looking for community-based services and treatments, and evidence-based models of integrated care. The 10th priority, when I say that it's the 10th, it's by no means, like a way down the list. It's a family experience, so it's not just the person that's living with the rare disease, it's the whole family is impacted. And the last one that we had was the best way to deliver a rare disease diagnosis. So now I'm going to hand back to Suja. I'll stop sharing.
Suja, you're on mute still.
Oh yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you so much. So thank you, Julie, for the wonderful presentation. You are really a research leader now. You are able to, go through the phases. So I just wanted to say where we published that, and anybody's interested, is all available online. What we've done as a partnership, we submitted to a HRB grant looking at the 5 PhD program. And you can see from the slide, we took the top 5 priorities and submitted to HRB grant called Collaborative Doctoral Award, so that we can attract the PhD student to undertake and address the need addressed by the families living with the patients living with rare diseases. And we have a collaboration with a charity group, universities across Ireland, and also healthcare professionals. And I know we were one of the 4, I think maybe 4 out of 59 shortlisted. We haven't got the funding, but we are hopeful we'll get the funding at some stage. So don't lose the hope, things will happen slowly and we will get there. But again, that partnership is so beautiful, and you can see how many people were involved in that grant application. And everybody is represented and across the north and south. And we are hopeful that this will also lead into a north and south collaborative partnership. Professor Amy Jane McNett is going to talk about north and south. So I just wanted to leave with a very positive note. All the hard work everyone put for the raindrop is not going to be wasted. This partnership will continue, and we will continue to change, or together we can change, or we can bring a nice experience in terms of research, engagement, and outcomes. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Suja and AJ. A fantastic example of partnership, and I love that you've put so much focus on PPI straight from the start of this meeting. So PPI, patient and public involvement. And in fact, the rare disease community have long been leaders in PPI, and the rest of the world is now catching up. And we see that particularly in a new PPI Ignite network that was launched just last year, that is really making great change happen in Ireland in terms of truly involving patients and members of the public in research. And all the Irish universities are involved, and Queen's University in Belfast, and many other national partners. If you have questions for Suja and Julie, perhaps you could put them in the chat, and if you don't mind picking them up there, Suja and Julie, that would be great. We're going to move on to the next talk there. And first of all, just to say, absolutely lovely to see the comments coming through in the chat there. And again, just reflective of that, I suppose that strong tradition of PPI and partnership in rare diseases, where people are coming from such different perspectives and all over the country, and even some people from the States. So it's really lovely to see that. I'm now going to hand over to Professor Rachel Crowley, who's a consultant endocrinologist in Vincent's and also attached to UCD, and Liam Galvin, who is a very high-level patient representative, and he's the CEO of the European Idiopathic Pulmonary Fibrosis Federation. And they're going to talk to something I'm very, very excited about, plans for a rare disease clinical trial network. So I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Avril. I think we're pretty excited also. It's nice to get the really enthusiastic lead into this. So I am a consultant endocrinologist in Vincent's, and myself and Cormac McCarthy, who is a consultant in lung diseases there, are the co-leads of this network. And because Cormac is a lung physician, he recruited Liam in to be our patient representative for all of this. Now, Liam is very modest, and he's going to be shaking his head and facing himself in this talk. So I'm shamelessly going to put him out front and center right now and say that Liam recruited in support for us from Europe. So with his backing, we got backing from Eurordis for this, which was hugely important. And he had a look at our clumsy attempts at writing late summaries for various bits of this, and we couldn't have done it without him. So it's great to have the opportunity to showcase this with him on board. But I think people maybe don't have an understanding of what a clinical trial network is. Certainly lots of people who are working in research don't. And so I thought I would just give a flavour of what a clinical trial network is and what trials are. So clinical trials are studies of things like medicine. So everybody thinks of clinical trials of a drug like aspirin. They could also be trials of a surgery or a procedure, like taking out somebody's appendix a different way or putting in a stent. And they can be tests of devices. So people think about pacemaker. We talked about implantable lenses in the eye was a device that we were talking about recently in a rare disease. Therapies. So for example, a different way of going about physiotherapy or cognitive behavioral therapy for pain is something that we've thought about. And basically we're comparing these maybe to an intervention that's already used in the community or no intervention at all to see what effect they have on health. And then networks for clinical trials
can you
are
hear
about
me?
groups getting together. Yeah.
Your sound is coming in and out a little bit. Maybe turn your video off and we'll see how we go. It's okay, it's fine, but just it might help a bit.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Is that any better?
So far, yes.
Okay, grand. Do stop me, Avril, as I'm going. So clinical trial networks are about groups of people getting together to deliver trials. So that they include obviously all different types of healthcare worker, patients, their carers, their family members, their advocates, scientists, so researchers who are doing basic science, looking at maybe a new diagnosis for a disease like a genetic background, perhaps, hospitals, clinics and universities. And so they're very much like a trial part of something like Avril described to you all is the clinical vision for this with rare diseases, the European reference networks. And so what does this trial network look like? Well, this is a picture of the kind of stakeholders who are involved. And so people were already, before we got the funding from the HRB to do this just recently, people were very active already in this space in rare disease. They were publishing trials in very prestigious journals and generating huge amount of funding. And if you look around this, you can see Irish partners across universities and hospitals, American, UK and European partners. You can see patient groups represented. You can see IPPOSI there. Raindrop is in here because as Suja and Julie were saying, they were focused very much on diagnoses and supporting families and where the gaps were and identifying all of those. But when Suja published the Raindrop survey findings, people had given feedback about treatments and interventions that might be of value. And we said that should not go to waste, just as Suja said, it should be used. And so that input went into what we were looking at for interventions for this clinical trial network. So all of you are involved in that. It's already having a big impact. What does it look like at the moment for clinical trials in Ireland? Well, in the 5 years before we put in the application, there are 47 trials registered in rare disease, excluding cancers. And because of Ireland's high prevalence of cystic fibrosis, a huge amount of this was in cystic fibrosis alone. So other rare diseases were very underrepresented in trials. And only 2 of those trials were led by an academic investigator. So say somebody like myself coming from UCD rather than, a big company, a pharma-led study, which is where the majority of work is done. But there's still a huge number of people who might benefit from us expanding this activity, because there's estimated, as you all know, to be about 300,000 people in Ireland living with a rare disease. And so the reference network centres are going to work on the clinical care side of it. They do have a research arm, but they are not funded or enabled at the moment to look at interventions. So all those things like drugs and devices and therapies that we could maybe build with a clinical trial network. So we built this concept, which has kind of 4 work packages to show you. So governance is the stuff that just makes the wheels turn. It's making sure that we have very clear processes for when somebody approaches us, that we write things the right way, that everything is on board legally. How we manage data is really important to patients and their families, so that we handle this securely, that we share it with people with your consent, that we share it with people that we know are going to do quality research and that it's going to go somewhere. That's a really important part of getting this right. And there's staff members to support both of those activities. The methodology and training piece is because some of the idea of what we do with interventions in other diseases aren't so great for rare diseases. So there's different ways of going about designing these studies. Maybe having patients take, say, for example, a drug for a short space of time, then come off it for a space of time, then go back on it again, can give a whole load of information about whether that patient really is getting a benefit from the drug or whether it's just what we call the placebo effect of knowing you're in a study. And so we're looking to train people who work with rare disease on all the different types of activity that might make them a better researcher in rare disease, and also to help patients and families become the active type of researcher that Suja and Julie were talking about, so that they can take part in whatever level they want to as a researcher rather than just a participant in the research. And then the last but not least arm that I'm going to say the most about is about the patient and public involvement and impact package. So this will have a dedicated staff member that we're finalising the recruitment for at the moment with the Health Research Charities Ireland. So it'll be shared across UCD and HRCI, which is really novel partnership. And that will bring patients into every part of the management of this network. So they will be sitting on the management and advisory and operations committees. They will be reviewing the studies coming in, saying this should be a priority over that. They will be having a look at individual studies, saying, I think we could rewrite this PIL a bit better. They'll be actually turning around after the research is done and having a big part in saying, this is a great project that was done and this is the impact that it should have. And having an impact on policy and reimbursement of interventions and spreading the word to more patients. So this is really, really important. And I'd like to think that the people who are involved in this forum today could potentially get involved at all these levels in the future in the 5-year course of this network. So where is it at the moment? We've advertised and we're interviewing for the network manager this month. We'll be advertising in the next week for the PPI liaison officer, that PPI person with the HRCI, and a database regulatory affairs manager to get all the data bit right. We'll be providing email and social media accounts, so you will be able to follow how this is going. We'll keep you hopefully very well up to date with how this is progressing. We'll be recruiting a patient advisory group, as I've said, and patient researchers to put in at all levels of this trial network. And we'll be having ongoing contacts with rare disease trials, with companies and patients. We'll be putting in grant applications, and we're doing presentations like this one. And that's been really active since it was announced that this trial network was coming into being. So what does it mean for patients living with rare disease? So ultimately, the goal of any trial network is that it should bring more new therapies for rare disease for patients who are living with the rare disease in Ireland. That is where it should end up. That's the whole point of having rare disease trials. But in the meantime, there'll be more trials available. And we know that patients get the best care, even if they're not in a trial, if they're going to a hospital where trials are active. Everybody raises their game. It'll give opportunities for patients and families to get involved in research and to learn more about their disease and to be really engaged and direct the way research is going in their particular rare disease and in rare disease in Ireland. And that's going to really raise the profile, I think. I have a sense very much that politically, rare disease is far more on the health and political agenda than it used to be. And of course, it's going to build collaborations across stakeholders and across countries. So we already have partners from Europe, the UK, and the US in this, but that should go wider and wider the more activity comes into the trial network. And so for patients, how will this look? So, I mean, patient can be a participant. That's the most basic level of taking part in a trial. They can, agree to have their case report published. They can take part in surveys. They can take part in studies within a trials. They can be what we call subjects, so actually taking part in the trial. But there are much broader roles that they can have. So, advocacy, with lots of people on this call have already taken part into funding bodies to say, this is a really important thing for you to reimburse for us living with the rare disease, to the hospitals and the healthcare institutions they go to saying, actually, we want this investigation turnaround faster, and we know that care is better from this study if we get access to these scans or these blood tests. And to the public, just telling people that, just because this disease is rare doesn't mean it's not deserving of funding and attention. And there's a huge role for advocacy here. And I think patients tend to recruit other patients in as research participants, literally just saying, I've got 3 family members who want to be in this trial too, and I've lots of experience of that happening in the past. But that's very active taking part in research, to recruit other people in and to recruit more members into the actual network. So to be researchers and to say, I've had a really good experience with contributing to this study. You've got a different disease, or you've more time or less time than me, maybe come in and see if this is of interest to you. I think it's important to influence what research areas researchers in rare disease like myself work on, to influence what should be funded. And so the joint programme that Avril was talking about between the HRCI and the HRB is an opportunity to do that, to influence public perception of rare diseases and political interest in it, which is ultimately where a lot of our funding, both for research and healthcare, comes from. And so patients have been really, really active in rare disease over many, many years, and having a voice over social media and mainstream media in this space. And of course, what we're mostly talking about in this meeting is researchers. So at the very beginning, into what question should we be asking? What is the intervention that's of interest? What are the side effects of the existing interventions that you'd like to see something clear of? How are we going to design it? How are we going to run it so it minimizes the impact on people's daily lives? How should it be governed? So, who should have oversight of it? Should we have a layperson who doesn't have this particular rare disease who can say whether this is being run properly or not? And at the very end of it all, of course, who's going to go out there and give a message to other patients living with the disease? Actually, here's a really important result and we want to share it with everybody. So I think that is the end of my bit. What I wanted to invite now is for Liam to jump in, who has some experience of a real trial network working in the EU, and share that with you all and how important it should be.
Thanks very much, Rachel, and thanks for letting me speak, and to everyone for listening. A bit of background briefly is I'm a volunteer with the Irish Lung Fibrosis Association and a co-founder and CEO of the European group. I don't really want to go into the disease, but it impacts about 300,000 people in Europe every year. So whilst we're a rare disease, we're slightly, we're not ultra rare. So that sort of saw me and the rest of our groups look at groups like IPPOSI, and who saw that academia, researchers, patients and clinicians and industry all have to work together. So that's what we did in our European group, and that's why we were so keen to support the Rare Disease Clinical Network, because with our work through the European Reference Network on Rare Lung Diseases, we could see that there was examples of how disease-specific clinical trial networks were working successfully. So in Germany, there's a clinical trial network run by the patient organization. And it actually supports the patient organization because industry, academia all pay into the clinical trial network, and you can only really do a clinical trial in that sector in Germany if you work through the clinical trial network. The Rare Disease Network here in Ireland is obviously at a very early stage, as are the European reference networks. But ultimately, the rare disease networks and the ERNs should be able to work together, not covering just uncommon rare diseases like idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which I represent, but the ultra rare. So by gathering those academics, the researchers, industry, all into one place, we have seen across Europe success being made, that that everyone is in the room. At the moment, clinical trials are suffering horrendously about patient recruitment. Sites are very hard to get, especially in lung disease, obviously post-COVID. So a clinical trial network really here in Ireland is a step in the right direction, and I was very pleased to support it, and I'm really wishing it well. But it's so important that everyone participates, everyone's in the same room, patients are put in the center, but industry, academia, researchers know who to come to. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Liam. So I suppose the message for this group here is we're here, we're getting set up, we're going to be putting out calls and contacting people over social media and through the HRCI and all our partners. And we've already had approaches from people who've heard about us. We're welcoming ideas. I've seen a few questions pop up that we'll talk about in the chat. But, you know, I'd just like you all to know that we're here. We're really keen to work with people coming from all backgrounds, patients, families, carers, healthcare workers, industry, you know, people who are thinking a little outside of the box from other areas in the community. And, you know, I hope that I haven't been too narrow in how I've presented this. We're interested in looking even at things that could spread across everybody with the rare disease, like, you know, I gave the example of a pain intervention, something for sleep, something for moods that might apply to lots of people on this call. And we're taking a pretty broad approach to it. And you and your families and all the people who work with it who need a bit more support are going to be at the heart of that. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk, Avril. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the questions, because I can see things popping up in the chat that I'm going to open and have a read of.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Liam. We've been so taken with you, Rachel, and Cormac as well, your co-lead on it, with your enthusiasm and your commitment and your lack of ego. And then you've got Liam's expertise in there as well, that deep patient experience and the knowledge of Europe. I think it's really, really strong, and we're so excited and a little bit scared, but mostly excited to work with you and supporting the PPI liaison role. And so this will definitely not be the last we hear about this network. But for now, we're going to move on to the next speaker. So I'm going to bring in Professor AJ McKnight. I've realized, AJ, we all call you AJ, but perhaps I should be introducing you more formally as Amy Jane. I should have asked you that, but you're very well known in rare disease circles, and another person with incredible commitment. And you're going to talk to us a little bit about what's happening in the north and some things happening up there that I think we are all a little bit jealous of and feel we could borrow from down here, and also the importance of the north-south collaboration. So you're very welcome, AJ.
Thanks very much, Avril. Can I just check my slide is up and you can all see it?
It is up, yeah, thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. So hello everyone, many thanks for the opportunity to share some of our research journey with you this evening. If I can get my slides now to move on. Okay, there we go. So it'll be no surprise to this audience that rare diseases represent a major public health concern. Do you know that approximately the same number of people are affected by rare diseases across Ireland as there are living with diabetes? Yet rare diseases receive much less recognition, much less support, and certainly much less research funding. This slide shows some numbers from local groups, but worldwide, both rare disease and diabetes affect approximately 6% of populations. That's more than 400,000 people across Ireland affected by rare diseases. So when we've been advocating for better diagnosis and improved patient journeys with their rare disease, we often hear, well, where's the evidence? There are too many competing priorities from our politicians. So together with founder members of the Northern Ireland Rare Disease Partnership and enthusiastic colleagues, we pulled together a report campaigning for a collaborative centre of expertise for rare diseases in 2013. We provided some cost benefit analyses and made multiple recommendations that included such a centre would be appropriately funded and staffed, don't laugh anyone, with a dedicated information hub. We wanted a rare disease registry. It would facilitate multidisciplinary clinics, promoting the use of extended clinical care guidelines. It would also work to streamline cross-border commissioning routes, ensuring patients could access the best treatment, clinical trials, and orphan drugs more easily. We also wanted a web-based portal for patients to be able to access their own medical records, to be able to book appointments across multiple specialties, and to facilitate the education and training of patients, informal caregivers, health and social care professionals. Now, it was very naive, but the important thing is that that is what started the ball rolling. After almost a decade of genuinely working together to collect a really robust evidence base, all of those core recommendations that were in our 2013 report are now embedded in our Department of Health's Rare Disease Action Plan. So our Rare Disease Action Plan was launched earlier this year, and it had 14 explicit actions for development within the next year. And that includes scoping an expert centre for rare disease, establishing a dedicated information hub for rare diseases, developing a rare disease population-based registry. Now, that doesn't mean the registry will be in place within the year. It means we'll have a plan to have the registry in place. Developing genomic strategies and reviewing newborn screening to improve diagnosis, improving access to clinical trials and orphan drugs, and scoping the potential for a patient portal where they can see their own electronic healthcare records. So one of the elements that directly relates to this meeting is improving awareness of and participation in rare disease research. Several multidisciplinary working groups have been set up to take forward the actions, all of which include partnerships between rare disease patients, the Northern Ireland Rare Disease Partnership, academic researchers, policymakers, and practitioners. And several of the elements link into the wider UK strategy. So for example, I'm part of a 4-nation group that's focused on national rare disease and congenital anomaly registries. We also have a UK Rare Disease Research Landscape group, which was a specific commitment in the English Rare Disease Action Plan. So we've worked really hard to embed a collaborative approach into driving forward rare disease progress in Northern Ireland. And this slide just shares 2 quotes from our Rare Disease Action Plan, both of which I think highlight our commitment to working in partnership to co-produce, co-design, and co-deliver the actions within the plan. So the development of the action plan was very much a collaborative approach, and it represents the first in what is a series of planned annual updates, reporting on regular progress being made and talking about new initiatives. Everyone brings their own expertise and their perspectives, and I think it's a very welcome step towards addressing many of the prioritised challenges that are faced by our rare disease community. So how did we get here? Largely through the efforts of the Northern Ireland Rare Disease Partnership, whose board membership at that time was very strategically combined. So it included experts at Queen's University Belfast, Ulster University, Health and Social Care Trusts, industry, people living with rare diseases, their caregivers, essentially working collaboratively with anyone we could bring on board. We got ministerial approval for our first Northern Ireland Rare Disease Plan, and this slide illustrates just how diverse our partners were. The collaborations were helped along by multiple mayoral events where they provided tea and coffee and dinner really to thank our rare disease supporters. I just wanted to highlight that the patient voices were a tremendously powerful voice for change, particularly when we came together and worked together. So our Northern Ireland Implementation Plan was launched in 2015, describing 51 key commitments that were largely aligned to the UK rare disease strategy, but we also included a commitment to promote cross-border working within the island of Ireland. So we continued to have an academic research partnership with a range of rare disease charities. And for the purposes of this evening, I've highlighted some research outputs here, some commissioned reports where we worked closely with NIRDP in particular. The rare disease field is one where patients, families, and patient groups often initiate research and really help drive the research agenda. Yes, as academic researchers, we all have our own very specialised field of interest, and we've lots of competing priorities. But many people are keen to genuinely support well-designed research in the best way possible. At leading universities, there are safeguards in place so that all research must be robustly designed and use appropriate methodologies and meet very stringent ethical and governance regulations. We can't just take money from someone and do what they ask, but we might be able to work with them to design the best project to suit their needs, or to explain why it's not possible and suggest alternative options. About a quarter of our rare disease research is done based on the goodwill of people in their own time. We need better strategies to fund rare disease research properly. As everyone in this call will know, there are never enough hours in the day to complete the essential tasks, never mind what else we would like to do. So we had lots of public engagement events over several years, and they resulted in the development of 46 recommendations for rare disease progress. Taking account of a really remarkable engagement from our rare disease community, a diverse group of stakeholders streamlined and prioritised these 46 recommendations for progress based on voices from more than 2,000 people across our rare disease community in Northern Ireland. Let me just say that again. 2,000 people living and working with rare diseases in Northern Ireland contributed to developing the recommendations. 34 priorities for action were identified and ranked into short, medium and longer term objectives. The group suggested that regular intention to deliver plans and progress updates should be shared with the local rare disease community. That was in 2020. Then COVID-19 hit. And while our government, molecular research laboratories and many staff were redirected to supporting healthcare delivery and testing during the pandemic, our suggestions for the next rare disease plan were significantly delayed. And then the UK framework for rare diseases was launched. And following a really massive, intensive effort from a few very dedicated people, we have our Rare Disease Action Plan published in 2022. This slide shows an example of a substantial collaborative research project that did continue throughout the pandemic, and we're delighted to have recently submitted for publication our review of implementing whole genome sequencing to improve the diagnosis of rare diseases across Northern Ireland. It wasn't open to everyone, it was a pilot study so that we could put in place mechanisms to effectively and efficiently deliver the service. So the paper provides a holistic perspective. We've looked at the administrative logistics of implementing whole genome sequencing. We've looked at patient experiences and taking part and getting the results reported to them. We've talked to healthcare professionals and what would make their participation better, and explored options to optimize the process of diagnosis for genetic conditions. There's lots of excellent recommendations and feedback from patients and healthcare professionals in the document, but I wanted to share this slide highlighting just some of the information patients said they would like to receive with their letter with their or their child's diagnosis. So I think this type of research, where we're looking at identifying the knowledge gaps and co-developing potential solutions which have a direct positive impact on patients, is just one of the areas where we really need more rare disease funding to enable change. Many of us have been working intensively with colleagues to promote an inclusive, excellent rare disease research across Ireland. Some excellent initiatives combined Raindrop that you heard about earlier and our RARTAC and Northern Ireland partnerships. It's really important that research is strategically coordinated and very carefully co-designed to systematically assess and address knowledge gaps for rare diseases across Ireland. We don't want to work in something that really has no direct benefit for patients. This has to be a collaborative, multidisciplinary approach. There's really a strong will to do this across Ireland. We've more than 135 investigators worked together on a recent funding bid for an all-Ireland Rare Disease Research Centre. We'd contributors from all 5 Northern Ireland hospital trusts, 10 Irish hospitals, all 7 Irish hospital groups, and multiple European reference networks directly engaging, all recognising the importance of research required to facilitate evidence-based health and social care improvements. Patient voices were at the centre of that bid, with many people living with a rare disease formally named as full partners. We need more researchers and funders to recognise the power of expert-based evidence for rare disease research in particular. Now, sadly, we weren't funded in that cycle, but there's never enough money from funders to go around, and we will keep trying. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that the publication of rare disease research in peer-reviewed journals, so where it's been checked by colleagues for authenticity and reliability and robustness, is really vital to enhancing awareness of rare diseases, to improving diagnosis and treatment, and to delivering really impactful changes to health and social care. We need to make sure these publications are open access so that all patients, clinicians, and researchers can easily read them without charge. And finally, I just wanted to emphasize, we know that careful, secure data sharing and open access saves lives. And I just wanted to say thank you very much and put some disclosures on the slides. So I hope that was interesting, and I'm very happy to take any questions either in the chat or after the fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, AJ. There was so much of interest in that and so much to learn from that. And it's fascinating we didn't intend this, but there's this really strong theme of collaboration and co-production and PPI coming through all the talks. And we're trying to do that ourselves through this Rare Disease Forum, where, you know, it's fantastic to be working with the Northern Ireland Rare Disease Partnership, as well as IPPOSI and Rare Diseases Ireland and Cystic Fibrosis Ireland. You also, something that really struck me there was that the amount of research that is done through volunteer hours, and, you know, we're so reliant on volunteer hours in the rare disease space in particular, and no doubt your level of commitment, a lot of your hours are actually volunteer hours, and I'm sure many of the professionals on the call will relate to that as well. So thank you very much, AJ. And yeah, I should have said that Vicky's going to try and pick up some questions at the end as well, time permitting, and we're going well on time, so that should be fine. So just bear that in mind. But for now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Linda McGrath, who's our Events and Communications Coordinator. Linda's done a huge amount of work for tonight, so thank you for that, Linda. And we were trying to think about how we can bring in some of the perspectives and views of the audience through an online event, which is difficult to really engage with people through this format. And so Linda's going to talk us through an engagement, what would we call it, Linda? We're using Mentimeter.
Mentimeter, yeah, it's basically just a way to engage with the audience that are here. We have 75 participants on this at the moment, so hopefully we will get some good feedback. We just have a couple of questions basically, so that we can allow all of you who've kindly given up your time to join us tonight to actually have your say and not just sit in quiet mute boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now, and you'll be able to see a little bit more. We're going to put some instructions in the chat box there, how to actually get into this, how to get into Mentimeter. I don't know, Sarah, if you're popping them in, because I can't see the chat at the moment. You have them in, perfect. So basically all you need to do there, you'll see in the chat function, you just need to go to menti.com, click on that link there that Sarah's put into the chat box, and that'll bring you straight up to this screen that you're seeing now.
Linda, I'm not seeing your full screen. I don't know if other people are seeing that. There's a black box coming up in front of it. So if there's anything important on your slide, would you just talk us through it as well?
Nothing important at all, just a random picture that I pulled from the internet. A free pick. Okay, so if you are able to get in, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see if you're in or not, but hopefully you'll be able to get in. And the first question that we have, once you get into menti.com and use your code, which is 70117730, is what do we need to enable more rare disease research in Ireland? Now, if you're having any problems getting into this, Menti, don't worry about it at all. You can put your answer in the chat function, and we'll pick it up there. The reason that we're asking these questions in the first place is obviously we want to get your feedback, but also because meetings and events like this really, really help us in HRCI and our colleagues who all make up the Rare Disease Forum Steering Group to build our advocacy asks. It's really important that we go direct to source and that we talk to the audience directly and find out, you know, what do we need to be doing? What do we need to be asking politicians when we meet them, when we're putting together our advocacy asks around rare disease, particularly for our position paper, which we launch every year in January. So yeah, if you've got any thoughts, feel free to stick them in. We've got 12 so far, so I think I'll start sharing those if I can. There we go. Okay, so we've got quite a few there. Funding, lots of funding. Okay, funding to universities for basic research. Make patients aware of this via medical professionals, GPs, public health nurses, consultants. Advocacy for specific rare disease grant calls, yeah, absolutely. And need to establish a rare disease registry. I mean, I think, yeah, we need a registry for many of the rare diseases and not so rare. Engage patients with funded time, research staff paid, registries to find patients, absolutely. We've actually touched on loads of these things in previous events that we posted. We also run the Irish Health Research Forum, which is a dedicated space for us basically to take a topic twice a year. We bring together all the kind of major stakeholders in the Irish health research area. So we've got HRB, Science Foundation Ireland, and obviously plenty of patient representatives from our charities. And we look to see what kind of challenges there are around certain topics, but also what kind of solutions. So we've definitely touched on research time, protected time for researchers, funding, etc. Okay, is there many more there? I don't think so. Okay, so let's move to the second question. So the next question that we have, if I can move it along. Good Lord, this is clunky. Can you tell I don't particularly love Mentimeter? Go to the next one. Okay, what strengths can we build on to improve rare disease research in Ireland? So, any thoughts on this, the strengths that we can build on? I think one obvious one that's come up in the chat is our willingness to collaborate, I think. Everyone, I think, that's spoken tonight has mentioned the strength that can be found in collaborating both north and south, but also with patients. Obviously in HRCI, we're big fans of PPI and patient and public involvement. So a few answers coming in. Let's have a look. Okay, great collaboration going on now. Absolutely, yeah. Listen to patients. Great existing partnerships between patient charities and researchers. Yeah, absolutely. We see that all the time in our work in HRCI. Increase it into leaving cert biology curriculum. That's interesting. Okay. Would that be specifically around rare disease research or National PPI Ignite Network? Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic to have the PPI network up and running now. We work very closely with them. Academic research, listen to patients. We've got loads of answers coming in. If I knew how to get down to them, there we are. Peer support to recruit more patients to participate. Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely looking at how we can recruit more patients from minority backgrounds, from those groups that people just don't hear about. So everything from migrants, the LGBT community, obviously, looking to the people who are coming through direct provision, Irish travellers. There's so many. What other strengths? Engaging with existing rare disease communities to share opportunities with their families. Yeah. The joint funding scheme. Shout out to the joint funding scheme. Fantastic. So many amazing groups out there and individual rare disease advocates. Build up the Irish rare disease community. Common goal to improve the lives of those living with rare disease. Okay, you answered my question. Thank you. Just the concept of rare diseases into the curriculum in the first instance. Yeah, I'd say probably plenty of people don't even realise that rare diseases are a thing. Compile existing research on rare disease in Ireland and compile learnings for the Rare Disease Office, HSC, Department of Health. Okay. God, there's loads of them in here. Newfound understanding of importance of research following COVID. Absolutely. That's something that we highlighted this year in our position paper. The fact that we wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Never has the Irish public been so engaged in research as the last couple of years. They've really had a huge learning curve, I think, myself included, because I'm not a PhD by any means. I'm events and communications, so I'm completely a lay person. So yeah, I think it was amazing to kind of learn so much about research and how it works and how you can get involved in it. So absolutely. Okay, and the last one I'm seeing there is send advisory report briefing team to the new Genomics and Policy Planning Committee. Well, maybe Vicky or Avril can say something to that actually, because HRCI are sitting on the planning committee for it. So I don't know if there's any questions coming through on the chat. Let me see. Is there any responses?
That's fantastic, Linda, and it's you know, that's going to be really useful for us to have that actually, as you said, for advocacy purposes and just to understand where people are at, and for future events of the Rare Disease Forum as well. And we're going to be sending you through a link to a feedback form before we finish. So we would love if you'd make just 3 minutes for that as well, and to think about what we want to do through this forum in the future as well. But that's some really, really rich stuff there. So thanks for running that, Linda. No, and now I'm going to hand over to Vicky. Oh, you were talking about input into the new planned national strategy for genetics and genomics, and as Linda said, we're sitting in one of the subgroups for that. And also through the Irish Health Research Forum, Linda mentioned that we run this. We had 2 events on genomics over the last couple of years, and we are feeding all that in as well. If there are things people particularly want fed in, they might get in touch with us. We're pushing strongly for more patient involvement in the process. But in the meantime, please do feel free to get in touch. Vicky, I'm going to hand over to you now. If you have any questions at all or comments for Vicky, please pop them in the chat. Vicky, are you with us there?
I am.
So Vicky is the CEO of Rare Diseases Ireland, and many of you will know her, of course. And Vicky, the final words over to you.
Well, I guess before I even start on all of my comments, just a big thanks to everybody for coming along and for still being here at 7:45 on a Wednesday evening. I think as we opened, we mentioned that people have dinners and bedtimes and life and gyms and all the rest of those things that need to be dealt with on a daily basis as well. So delighted to have so many here and to see so many still online, and really appreciate it. I think, you know, I guess we've covered a huge amount today, and there's been a lot of detail given by our 3 main sessions, and of course Avril with the opening with as our role with Health Research Charities Ireland. I think I might just start by saying, you know, research, it's come across in 1 or 2 of the comments, research doesn't need to be complex. Where each of us are involved in research, we can each kind of like contribute in ways to research, you know, doing, you know, asking the people around you about what's happening and trying to formulate, I guess, better knowledge and understanding that, you know, that organizations can conduct advocacy and things like that. That's all research. It might not be published research like we would consider it to be, or a clinical trial like we might consider, you know, research needs to be, but everything that you're doing, everything that you're saying, all of the feedback that you give when you I guess when you answer maybe a brief survey that somebody's looking at or doing, this is all research, it all contributes to the body of knowledge. And it is this body of knowledge that has driven things like rare disease plans, that, as AJ spoke about, you know, 2,000 individual contributors providing pieces of information, and it all comes together and helps to move policy forward. And it's critically important that we all recognize that even our small, what might appear like a very small contribution, is actually incredibly important. One of the things that I was involved with RDI, with some of the genetics service here in Ireland, or down south recently, was doing, you know, a survey. And it's just timely that we now have all of this information that we'll be able to feed into this genetics and genomic strategy, you know, the real lived experience. And so just, you know, I guess if you can, please do share your experiences, your desires, get involved in PPI, reach out to Avril, reach out to Rachel, get involved in the clinical trials, provide your oversight. I know that we're all busy and stuff, but it's really critically important, because actually it's the people with the lived experiences, the people that are hearing this on a daily basis, that really, really understand where we need things to go. And I guess I might move on to one or two of the questions that came up in the chat. And Rachel, if you are willing to answer a question, and this is something that Anne Lawler speaks always about, it's the back of the ranch. It's, you know, I guess addressing the needs of people in their home environment. And is there any room, do you think, within the clinical trials network, as it has been designed right now, for psychosocial research, for understanding really what's happening in, you know, back of the ranch in people's homes, you know, the lived experience, I guess, of rare diseases? Is that part of what you would see, or will that be something that we need to push for to be plugged in due course?
So I suppose the clinical trial network is about finding interventions that work. So doing psychosocial research is part of generating a question for an intervention. I hope that comes across. So Suja was discussing the collaborative doctoral award application, where they were submitting PhDs to explore psychosocial questions. The hope would be that that type of research would raise a question that could be an intervention. So I'm going to give a really concrete example, because I think that's difficult to understand. Say you find that, you know, a large proportion of people living with rare disease have a lower quality of life because their mood is low. Well, then maybe developing an intervention like cognitive behavioral therapy that we could deliver online and see if people do better with that intervention would be the type of thing the network could do. And yet, like I said, an intervention doesn't have to be a drug or a device. It could be a therapy. But I suppose you need a question for the intervention to help. And probably what Suja was talking about is the step that would answer that question. I absolutely think that, you know, psychosocial interventions are part of it all, and a huge part of living with rare disease. I saw when Anne was talking about it, she said some people may not get a cure or a therapy, but all the other things in their lives can be made better on the way. And that's huge.
Yeah, okay, that's great, Rachel. That's hopefully reassuring for everybody out there. And I guess, you know, our roles are to gather some of those questions and to bring them forward to see if they can be funded and supported through the clinical trial network. AJ, I was really, really impressed with getting 2,000 respondents into your work, into the research that you were doing. How did you manage to bring so many people with the lived experience to the table? You know, how do you get people to actively engage and share and things like that? Do you have any tips for the rest of us?
I guess the main thing is we used a lot of different approaches. You know, so we tried focus groups, we tried workshops, we tried public engagement events. The biggest turnout we had on one day was 787 people contributed to the data privacy survey. That was a survey that only ran for a month, but in Northern Ireland, there is a statistics agency that runs a survey asking about how much people trust their healthcare data and how much they want it to be shared. And about 60% of Northern Ireland basically were happy with no concerns. When you're talking to your rare disease community, those numbers are very, very different. You know, so many people with a rare disease are very, very happy for their healthcare information to be securely and safely shared to help them get their diagnosis. there is literally no other way to do it for rare disease communities in particular. So we have a very different perspective on it, and I think it was really important to capture that, and people were keen to get their views across, but essentially use lots of different approaches.
Yeah.
Group hub, tea, coffee, and lunch helps. As they said, you know, many of our PPI partners, some projects are funded, some are not. So, you know, if we can supply dinner, coffee, and lunch while we're asking you to do something, we will.
Yeah. Very good, very good. And of course, no pandemic as well, please.
Absolutely.
Very good, very good. Avril, a question came in from Patrick at NIRDP around, you know, if you are somebody living with a rare condition and you're looking for access to research of any description, how do you go about finding that? Where would you start?
Oh, that is a huge question. And I think we learned a lot about that through the pandemic, and misinformation and disinformation. And I suppose the trouble is there is no one place to point to. There are many, many different reliable sources though, and it's really about considering what your source is. So is it some national funded body, or is it a hospital with a very strong reputation like the Mayo Clinic in the States? They always have fantastic information. So it's, I think the bigger thing really is educating people about what is a reliable source of information, and then there are sites, particularly for rare diseases like Orphanet, which has information on the healthcare professionals and the researchers in any particular country that are working on a condition, and more information besides. And then beyond that, maybe people might stick it in the chat if there's something in particular they think we should be pointing to. I'd missed that question, so I hadn't been totally prepared for that one, and I'm sure I'm missing things.
Okay, thank you very much, Avril, nonetheless. I guess, can I go back to Suja and Julie? How did you go about, I guess, establishing your relationship? And clearly you have a very good relationship, the two of you, and it can be difficult sometimes to I guess, create that relationship, that dynamic that you can actually talk openly with one another about your fears and your concerns. And you know, I guess, do you have any recommendations? What's the pros and cons of doing this kind of research? I mean, Raindrop delivered a huge amount to lots of people, but let's hear it from the horse's mouth. How was it for you guys in the middle of it?
Thank you, Vicky. Again, guys, lovely to see you, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm living in Ireland 20 years. Still, I don't have Irish accent, so apologies for that. I can't change the way I am. So just wanted to say, the building the relationship happens not overnight. It take time. So I know people I work with for the last maybe 10 plus years, you know, and we always had this vision. It's like Steve Jobs always say, the vision, that vision pulls you. I think we have a common vision, and that is the vision pulls us together as a people. It's not just me or Julie, there are many other people involved. Just going back to the question you asked us earlier to Rachel, clinical trial is key. We all need that. That is one of the core priority also identified through Raindrop. And again, psychosocial research always find very challenging to get funded. Even for example, Rachel were involved in the HRBCDA, similar to AJ was involved, many others, including Professor Eileen Tracy was involved as well. So if you, for example, data integration and trying to understand the experience and outcome measures, that is really good. And we could look into that, and we could bring the patient experience and families, social economical impact of living with their condition, and we could design an intervention to support the needs. You know, we are giving people a choice how we can support their need. As you know, many people are living with a rare condition. Either they have to give up the job, they become full-time carers. The challenge on all the family unit is huge. The child and family comes in the middle, but the challenge is all around them. So these are the little things we could do and support the family unit, support the child or a person living with illness, and the community. But then we could design an intervention. So I think the funders At the moment, psychosocial research, very difficult to get a funding. Thankfully, I have 3 students are starting in September with their own funding, with their own scheme in rare diseases. I'm getting so many calls from the students. They wanted to do research in psychosocial care needs. And then we could link in with Rachel in terms of trials, the mood, anything, functionality testing, quality life scale, pediatric life scale. I'm working with the UPMC at the moment. I can see how trial work and how these could work together in collaboration. So there are opportunities. So I may stop there. Otherwise, I could talk here for all day. So I may pass over to Julie. Thank you.
I think one of the big things, one of the big advantages we had was that we have a common goal, and we have like a can-do attitude. Like anytime we had a problem or anything, there's like look around and try and get it solved. And being able to listen to each other and to be totally honest, like about like what the problems are. And talking a common language. There's, it's not jargons or that, that we're using. I think, like whenever we were working in the Raindrop project, I learned a huge amount, like about, like all the data that was coming in and how are we going to condense all this information that we had. But I think the big advantage we had was being able to listen to each other and being able to, to work together towards a common goal. I think that was the big thing we had.
Thank you very much, Julie. I guess what I'm hearing loud and clear is there's unmet needs, and we need to trust one another that we're working towards delivering on the same needs, that this is critically important. And I think that the rare disease community is a good example of how we can do that. We are I guess very collaborative in pretty much everything that we do, trying to support one another, and that's that's what we're here to do. That's what Rare Disease Forum is about. It's about creating that opportunity for all of us to collaborate and work with one another. I see that we're fast approaching 9 o'clock, or 8 o'clock, I should even say. Sorry, and I certainly don't want to keep people unnecessarily. I might just wrap up with a few, I guess, points, just to show that we are making progress. The North-South collaboration is very important for all of us. We do a lot of work on the island, and rare diseases don't know borders, as with I guess many things. There's progress being made in the north with their rare disease action plan that we look enviously at in the south, but we will keep pushing for our own similar document here. The European reference networks coming into Ireland are hugely important for us. They really are an avenue when we consider that over 30% of people living with rare diseases in Ireland or in South, we don't have access to any type of clinical expertise in the country, and that's just by dint of the population. It's just inevitable. So we need to, I guess, make sure that these ERNs work for us. We are the type of country that the ERNs were designed for, and so we need to make sure that they work for us, both in terms of providing clinical care, in terms of providing research opportunities for us to access and for our care providers to get involved in, and also as a source of education. One of the things that we do, I guess, that we find very challenging is that quite often if you meet your primary consultant, they won't even know what the rare condition is or be able to provide much information on it. And so the ERNs will hopefully support much of that in the future. Notwithstanding Alan Findla's comment there about the ERNs and being involved in them, and Liam as well, I'm sure has seen it as well, that I guess they're focused on certain areas at the moment, and the areas might change as different patients and clinicians get involved. And we certainly would like to see more involvement of Irish patients in the ERNs. And now that we have them on board in Ireland, hopefully that will happen over the coming months. The joint funding scheme that Avril Kennan spoke about, critically important. It is, I guess, the tip of the iceberg of what we need for rare disease research funding, but it is a start, and it's only by, you know, I guess, getting research off the ground and demonstrating how this type of research can improve the lives of people in Ireland, that we will get more research opportunities. The genetics and genomic strategy is obviously important for all of us in terms of both clinical care and accessing research and conducting research, period. And so, you know, we're optimistic that it will move in the right direction. It certainly is part of the programme for government. So we can only but hope that they will actually put their money where their mouth is, and actually start funding something appropriate to meet our needs. So listen, I guess without further ado, I'm not going to hold on to us indefinitely, but I really do want to say a huge thanks to everybody who contributed. Firstly, to our speakers, Suja and Julie, Rachel and Liam, Amy Jane and Avril, to HRCI for organising this rare disease forum, the second in a series. We've committed to having 3 per year, so the third one will be in November time frame. So I guess keep an eye on the social media. IPPOSI will be leading out on that one, and then we'll look to start planning for next year, and we'll probably have something in or around Rare Disease Day again next year. I guess typically we're going to try and host some do evening online events, as it seems to be more accessible, but we'll be open to doing some in-person events, I think, over the next year as well, not necessarily the Rare Disease Forum, but other activities as well. So please do keep in touch with everybody, and if you have any, I guess, desires that you would like to see the Rare Disease Forum addressing, any areas that you think really should be addressed by the forum, please do let us know, and we'd love to hear from everybody. And without further ado, I will say sayonara, good night to everybody, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.